will Christian McCaffrey live up to this record contract?
Unfortunately, he won't. And it's no indictment on his abilities and how great he is. And he knows, and I talked to him during the Super Bowl as recently as that, tell him how great I think he is. He's dynamic. He's versatile. He can do it all. But I think what happens with record-setting contracts is that it sets an enormous amount of expectation on a player that they basically can't live up to. Think about what this contract suggests. It suggests that in a career year, Christian McCaffrey is now the highest paid running back ever. But when you see that career year, there's an expectation that you could actually duplicate those numbers. And it's kind of absurd for people to always expect someone to have career years. And I'm not saying that he's tapped out in terms of potential. I'm just saying that the production that he had last year didn't necessarily translate into ultimate team success. So they may tinker with his production in terms of attempts and carries. Then you talk about the fact that this is a guy who's looking to go out there and really have a balancing act that's going to be on Teddy Bridgewater in terms of his production. I'm not completely sold that Teddy Bridgewater will come in there and take enough pressure off the running game or allow Christian McCaffrey to go out there and have the same numbers in terms of reception. So too many unknowns for him to go out there and duplicate this amount of success. So I would say no.
Yeah, I would go ahead and disagree with you, Marcellus. And Christian McCaffrey is such a unique character, such a unique football player. And I think that's what sets him apart. He can be powerful enough to run between the tackles. He's got tons of yards out there. He's dynamic and fast enough to get outside the tackles. 116 receptions. You know that would have led the league in 9 of the last 16 seasons. And he took second in number of receptions only to that of Michael Thomas. So he is a complete player. He's a complete professional. I say this all the time. Just because you play a pro sport doesn't make you a professional. This guy is the ultimate professional from a diet standpoint, exercise standpoint, taking care of his body standpoint. He learned from his father, Eddie McCaffrey, how to do that. So he is just one of those unique characters. And conscientious is, I think, the thing that comes to mind more than anything else when I think about Christian McCaffrey. He wanted to know, how do I become the first-team All-Pro guy instead of second-team All-Pro, which he was in 2018? He went to Ron Rivera and said, what do I have to improve on? Ron Rivera says, you have to be better in pass protection. So we went out and got tapes of Darren Sproles, how to get in the line of scrimmage, how to take the fight to them so that he could be better. And last year, I think he played about 98% of the snaps for the Carolina Panthers. So I don't see he's just a unique character. He does not seem to take squared up, flushed hits. He always seems to be able to protect himself that way. I think the sky is the limit, and I think he deserves to be the highest paid running back, and I think his production will continue to soar.
I'm going to add to Mark's argument with this. You know, barring injury, I think, Marcellus, he's going to live up to these expectations and live up to this contract for this reason. You have new ownership in Carolina and David Tepper. You have a new head coach in Matt Rule. And so this is their first big move. We're going to step out here and make Christian McCaffrey the highest paid running back in football. We are now moving on from Cam Newton, and the face of our franchise, and the biggest decision we've made is we're going to build around Christian McCaffrey. That type of investment from the higher-ups, that goes a long way in determining success. They're going to provide him the offensive line. They're going to provide, if they need a fullback, and whatever they need to do to make sure this guy lives up to the huge bet they placed on him. You'll see this in every walk of life. An organization, whether it be in the newspaper industry or whether it's in the car dealership industry or whatever, they'll go out and make a hire and make a big splash decision, and come hell or high water, they're going to prove that they were right for making this decision. I think for the reasons Mark expressed about this guy's character, you know, being a second-generation NFL player, understanding the journey of the NFL, and just the investment the Carolina Panthers have taken. In an era right now where everybody's saying don't overspend for running backs, they just, in some people's mind, overspent for a running back. Marcellus, I think they're going to do everything in their power to make sure Christian McCaffrey lives up to this contract because it's in all their best interest.
Yeah, it's in their best interest, and I totally agree with the sentiment that he's an amazing player, amazing leader, amazing person. But these amazing numbers that justified this contract are now going to increase the expectations, and those numbers with the new reset expectations will be nearly impossible to go out there and account for. Think about it. This is a guy who had 403 touches last year. We're talking about 2,392 scrimmage yards. And you're saying that he's going to be able to duplicate that. One, why would you even want to attempt to duplicate that? Because it only led to 5 wins. Then you say, well, Teddy Bridgewater's not Kyle Allen. You're right. But who is Teddy Bridgewater in terms of taking the pressure off the running game, 8, 9, 10 in the box? And I'm not trying to compare him in precedence to other running backs, but there's a commonality and a common denominator between Ezekiel Elliott, David Johnson, high prize running backs who all of a sudden find that it's a little more difficult despite having the same approach and same abilities. So when you look at the numbers, even last year, Christian McCaffrey, first 8 games, they were 5-3. Christian McCaffrey had 5 games over 100 rushing yards. In the next 8, they lose all 8, and he only has 1. So when you're able to focus on him because he's the center of this offense, the core piece, if Teddy doesn't take that pressure off him, the receiving game doesn't take that pressure off him, the numbers will decline.
I don't even think it's about whether the numbers decline or not. They may decline to a degree, but he is such a weapon, such a 3-down weapon. And regardless where he is on the football field, he can line up outside the numbers at receiver, in the slot at receiver. He can carry it out of the backfield between the tackles, outside. He is such a versatile player that every time you line up as a defense, the first thing you have to do when you break your defensive huddle is find 22. Where is he and how are we going to deal with him? And that becomes such a valuable asset as you open this thing up. I don't know what Teddy Bridgewater is going to be either. I don't think anybody does at this point, but I do know what Christian McCaffrey is, and he is an offensive weapon, and those offensive weapons have an effect, a complementary effect on everybody on that football team, and that's why he's valued, and that's why he's worth the money.
Look, I've seen marriages between a coach, a running back, and an organization work beautifully. I saw it with Dick Vermeil and Priest Holmes in Kansas City. You could argue, we saw it with Dick Vermeil and Marshall Faulk in St. Louis. Matt Rule, a big part of this decision-making to pay this guy, he's going to make it work. I think this organization's all in on Christian McCaffrey. He's the modern-day Marshall Faulk. He's headed into the peak, the prime of his career. The time to give him this money and to strike and to live up to these expectations right now, this is the right kid, right investment. I think it's going to happen.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. And be sure to check out more of the best clips from Speak For Yourself or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.